we go to tonight's amazing guest, Alan Adamson. Alan Adamson, some background about our very distinguished guest. He's a young guy, but a storied career, worked at a number of Fortune 500 companies. He is now the co-founder and managing partner at Metaforce. Metaforce is an agency that helps business understand all the forces at work inside and outside their organization. Alan has written 4 books on the topic of branding and staying relevant, and his latest book, I'm holding in my hands, an autographed copy, Shift Ahead, How the Best Companies Stay Relevant in a Fast-Changing World. With that intro, we give a very warm welcome to Alan Adamson. Alan, thank you for joining me here on Mind Your Business.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very, very special. We have a lot to cover with a guest like yourself. Perhaps we could even just open up with in 60 seconds, if that's possible, a little bit about your background to where you are today.
I wanted to be a filmmaker. Spielberg didn't hire me, to my disappointment, even though I was ready to operate the remote control shark on Jaws. So I went to business school, came out, went into the Mad Men world of advertising, which was a fun place to be back then.
Okay.
Worked on made short films, 30-second films, back when they had 30-second films. Okay. Then went to the client side at Unilever, worried about skin and soap, and learned a lot about competing every day on a supermarket shelf. Mm-hmm. And then finally you joined a firm called Landor, which was a global brand and branding firm, and helped clients. Clients would come to Landor not when things were going great and sales were going through the roof. They'd come to Landor saying, we didn't have a good year and we're not feeling very good and things are going bad. What do we do? So it was a great training ground to work with all sorts of organizations, big and small, different categories. At a time their business was in need of redirection.
So now you just came out with this book. I mean, this is a work, Shift Ahead, How the Best Companies Stay Relevant. So, Alan, and you co-authored this with Joe Steckel. Tell us, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the interview, which is, of course, about the book, when did you have the aha moment, say, you know what, the content that I'm going to be sharing in this book is what I see people are hungry for and thirsty for, and therefore I need to write this book?
It came out for a couple of years where more and more clients were coming to the firm and asking for help, and finding that they have become your father's Oldsmobile. They were not that relevant anymore. Their business was not doing well. And I said, is it me, or are people falling behind faster and faster? And is the world changing faster, which are causing more businesses to become less relevant over time? And so I said, let me take some time off, and I partnered with Joel Steckel, who's a professor at NYU, and we had the benefit of lots of interns and help, and we interviewed and researched over 100 companies, big companies, small companies, nonprofits, profits, and we asked them, what's going on in your business? Why did you fall behind? What happened? Right. And what can others learn? And Joel was really good because he took the stories and he helped me translate them into teachable moments. So even though you're not BlackBerry, and that's not your problem. What can you learn from what happened to BlackBerry? What can you learn from what happened to Kodak that will be applicable to your business no matter what category you're in? And we were able to translate the stories into things to keep in mind to keep your business relevant and competitive.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned Kodak. We had run a conference a couple of weeks ago, and Jeffrey Hazlett was the keynote speaker, and he was a former CMO at Kodak, and he went to town describing the challenge and what the takeaways are. But what I love about what you're sharing and what the book is all about is that a smart person learns from his mistake. A smarter person learns from others' mistakes.
And don't just say, well, it will never happen to me. Right. Kodak they own pictures globally, and if they can come down from that, you should pay attention to what happened.
Now, staying relevant is a challenge to every organization. What's your advice for any company to make sure that they are staying relevant?
Well, I'll start at the end. And the end is a quote when we spoke to the folks at Marriott. And one of Bill Marriott's famous quotes was, "Success is never final." And if a company gets confident that they are successful and they know what they're doing and gets arrogant, and doesn't have a little bit of what the former Intel CEO said, Andy Grove, only the paranoid survive. Right. Invariably, no matter how successful you are, if you think you've arrived at your destination and that you are king of the castle, you will undoubtedly find yourself as tomorrow's Kodak.
Such important advice. You know, that
It's
so
an
many
attitude,
people,
you know.
and it's an attitude.
You know,
I mean,
and in fact, that gets back to one of the stories I just mentioned. When we talked to the folks at BlackBerry, you know, they owned no one thought they could send an email without a keyboard.
right.
And when you spoke to the folks that were there from the time they were at the top of the hill until the time they were in the valley, the number one reason they give, in hindsight, is they had arrogance. They believed Apple was a toy. No one would really seriously type emails with their fingers on a screen. And their arrogance, if you would, their overconfidence, when they saw the iPhone come out, they said, "Oh, that's a toy. It won't be serious." You know, anyone serious in business carries a BlackBerry. In fact, they carried it strapped to their belt.
Right.
We owned the
That's
Masters
right.
of the Universe at that time. Obama had one, and
Right.
investment banker. So part of what the other thing is, it's never one thing. It's never one thing that causes you to go from top of the mountain to the bottom. But there was a correlation between most of the companies that have fallen behind had a degree of arrogance and overconfidence that prevented them from taking their competition or a new entrant seriously.
So it just made them complacent, basically.
Complacent and not worried about it, not paranoid enough.
Now, can I ask you, from someone of your level of experience, how many companies fall into that? Ultimately, what leads to complacency, whether it's arrogance or it's just they're taking their clients for granted. How many companies, percentage-wise, would you say more than 50%, more than 90%?
Most of the companies that fail to shift ahead, at least half of them had a sense of overconfidence and not maybe all the way to arrogance, but a sense of, we know what we're doing, we shall make it, they will come.
Now, what are the barriers that prevent companies from having the shifting ahead mindset?
Right. And that's one of the things when we set out to do the research, we were hoping we could find, here are the 3 easy steps to keep your business relevant and growing. And by and large, there were not 3 easy steps. We'll come back to some of the things that you can do to increase your chances. But there were far more things that you could do to help to push your business into irrelevance. So there are far more red flags and warning signs than there are easy fixes. One of the first ones we discovered across many, many organizations is you have to appreciate human nature. And we all have a bit of what we call Marty Crane in all of us. And if you remember the old show Frasier, Marty Crane was Frasier's dad, who in a nice new Seattle apartment had an old lazy boy recliner there because he was more comfortable. And most of us are more comfortable with the familiar, more comfortable with the past. And so one of the things we found is that across the board, if you don't realize your natural resting point is yesterday is better than tomorrow, and everyone says they're open to new things, but they begin their day, routine sets in. And the corollary one is many, many people operate on cruise control. Organizations. I sort of realized this. I was teaching my teenager to drive a couple of years ago, and when I learned to drive, there was something called, if your listeners look up on Wikipedia, something called a manual transmission, and you had to actually shift the gears to change the speed.
Yep.
And when you were driving a manual car, you had to really listen to the engine.
Yeah.
You had to pay attention to the road. If you're going uphill, you needed a different gear than if you were passing. You had to make it
you're
complicated. Now, when you drive a car, you just you program your phone, and your car almost drives itself. And so, part of success is getting out of cruise control and paying attention to the road.
Great point.
And just looking at everything, if you would, with fresh eyes and smelling what's around you, seeing what's around you, as opposed to just being on cruise control, getting in the car, turning the key, turning the radio on, and just zoning out. And many people run their business. They come to the office, they read a few emails, they get into a routine, and they get unable to see change happening in front of them.
I love the honor of interviewing C-level executives and sharing their great advice and perspective on Mind Your Business. I'd love to get your feedback. Post it in the comments below and subscribe. You'll never miss an edition of Mind Your Business.